Kubor na Khlem jong Nongsan Hima.
Director Kanigrams Professor Dr. Nalin Mehta ulapan pau ka jing songkhya halor ka jing panankam gilat pathai khubor ya ki kintin ki bakhya thau ha ka bala tho bagate ka jaka ai jing sumar kala le torti Dr. Mehta ulakren halor ka jing sha ka no le torti bat bam su nyo ki nong sumar ka te ka hospital ya ka we ka nong pang ka bala Khlad no dang shen halor ka ni Dr. Mehta ulapan shai bagate ka samla ka donye ka jing pang tuberculosis lani TB Bat kala don ke jingwit haki benta jong ke senir, bat namar kata, la don kam ban puit ya ka. Hadin bala depet benia, kala don ke jing ya keren hapadeng ki doktor badai puit, bat kila ai jingmut ban su puit nyo. Kumta kate ka samla ka bathiak pang ha kate ka hospital, ka Khlem menjur ban sya puit ha katu ka sengi. Ha ka sengi ka babuat, kate ka nong pang kala ai ka jing menjur ban sya puit. Bat namar ba kala Jingshitom jur, ki doktor kila liat tang ya ka badan kam, ban le ban pelat ya ke jingwit haki senir. Hadian kata lara no ya ka sya ICU, bat kaladan ke jing thut ha ke jingring mensim, namar ba kaladan ke jinglang haki tor. Kumta ki doktor kilapan ya ke jing menjur naka, ban tap yu pipe na syentur, ban yarap ya ka, bakan la ban ring mensim, bat ka Khlem ai ke jing menjur, tat hadu hadian. Te namar kata, kani ka samla kaladan ru ya ke jing pang ha ukulong senam, Par kala jusha sumar teng ha kate ka hospital, house nem, hajar khat nyo. Hadin kata kani ka samla kala Khlad no na kini ki jingpang. Dr. Mehta loong, baki jing huri hura kila mi, namar ba don na pedeng ki bahayeng, ki Khlem sngo thu bahaya ka jingpang Jingshitom, ba kate ka samla ka don. Dr. Mehta ulapan syai, baka Khlem don kanu ka Jingleh Torti na kinong sumar, ya kate ka samla. Bat kila ai ya ke jing sumar ka babiang tam na ka benta jong ka. Haba yo pat bania karan ba head of department surgery unit Dr. Topno uloong bakan sa don ka jing wat bania halor ka te ka jingjia na ka liang jong ka hospital.
Gone through the details that have come out in the press, and it is unfortunate that press at times utilizes some words which are very, very strong. Negligence basically is defined as something, medical negligence, where somebody does something which nobody normally would do, which is not true. Here, in fact, I have with me my head of the Department of Surgery, who is currently officiating as the medical superintendent, also with some details. But we had a very sick patient who had multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. She was admitted with us, she was investigated, and she had obstruction. She was not passing through intestinal obstruction. And normally when the obstruction is for a long time, surgical intervention is required. So after the investigation was done, the surgeons were consulted and they suggested surgery. Initially the patient refused. The next day the patient agreed to undergo surgery. And this surgery, because the patient is very sick, is basically not very extensive. It just bypasses the obstruction, temporary relief from the obstruction, so that when the patient recovers, later on extensive surgery may be undertaken. In the meantime, because of probably the drugs that she was taking, there was liver damage. Post-surgery, she was admitted in the ICU. She had difficulty in breathing. The doctors wanted consent for intubation. Intubation is where a tube is put to help in breathing. She refused. The next day, when her condition worsened, she agreed for intubation. Intubation was done. There was trouble breathing because she had, like they say, water in the lungs. She is a known heart patient also. She had heart treatment earlier, maybe in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And eventually the patient succumbed. And the controversy erupted probably because some of the relatives of the patients were not very clear about the details, or they did not understand the technical details that were explained by the doctors. So that probably is one of the issues. Beyond that, I am not aware of how the newspaper reported negligence, because every investigation and the standard treatment that is given to such patients was given by negligence. I will request my colleague, Professor Noor Topno, who is head of the Department of Surgery and officiating medical superintendent today, to give you a few details, or if you have any questions, he he may give you the answers.
After the operation, the condition of the patient was not very good. So because of the condition not being very good, the patient was shifted to the main ICU. We have multiple ICUs. So this main ICU is the one which is one of the best that we have around here, and that is managed by the anesthetist. So patient was kept there from 17th up to 20th. When the condition of the patient became little better, the patient was shifted down to the other ICU, which is a little lesser ICU, that is called the surgical ICU. Usually we keep all those post-op patients and sick surgery cases over there. Over there, if they become better, they go to the ward. If they become worse, they go back to the ICU. So that was the condition of the patient. So till 21st, patient was more or less okay. But the next day, on 22nd, she had this breathing difficulty. And that was probably because of accumulation of fluid in the lungs. And also there was extensive damage to the lungs because of the earlier tuberculosis that she had. So by the time they are MDR, before MDR they are taking usually the other normal drugs, and then they have been taking other drugs also,
MDR
which is for multi-drug resistance tuberculosis. Okay, so unfortunately the general condition of the patient was quite bad. And there was one more thing, we had planned to give her 5 days of albumin. That's an injection that helps reduce the collection of fluid in the body. Okay, unfortunately because we lost the patient, we could not do all that. And the rest I think has been well dealt with by my director. If you have any questions, I can answer. Many a times is there is actually a difference in perception. Now the patient, what I understand was, patient was complaining that she is not able to breathe. Okay, but at that time patient had refused intubation, but she was being given oxygen by mask. Now one of the things I got to understand was patient did not see any oxygen cylinder. But here in the ICU, we have actually the gas, we have gas pipelines, and it comes through basically pipeline, the gas. So it is very, very improbable that in a patient who is as sick as that, we would not be giving oxygen. So I don't know, I think this is probably a misconception somewhere. I can, as a surgery person who's been there more than 35 years in this profession, I can give you a general outline as to what we do. What has transpired between the doctor and the patient, I won't know unless I really ask them or somebody gives me that information. Generally what happens is, I don't think any further operation from surgery part would have been required, because like initially we told, a patient whose condition is very bad, we don't try to do the full surgery at that time. We do just enough. Like supposing there's a road which has got multiple potholes and very badly damaged. At most what we do is we provide a bypass. We do the repair later. So in this condition, same thing. Once the general condition becomes better, then only we are going to do the full surgery. You know? So I don't know what has transpired, so I cannot really comment on that part. But the approach usually is this. So from surgery side, I don't think any further operation would have been contemplated. Yeah. So I'll give you the example of, supposing there's a, now this was what is called as intestinal obstruction. By intestinal obstruction, what we mean is, in the intestine, because of tuberculosis, there is total constriction like this. And food and other things don't go down. And that was the complaint of the patient. So once we did the CT, we knew exactly what is the problem and where the problem was. Okay. So the operation ideally would be to take out the whole area which is causing obstruction. That means you do a much bigger operation. But in this patient, that kind of operation is not very good because of the general condition of the patient. So what we did is what is called as a bypass. Suppose this is the intestine coming and this is where the block is. So just keep it. Yeah. Supposing this is where the block is, right? So what we do is we make an opening in the intestine here. And that opening is brought out here. So that whatever food particles which are held up over there can actually come out. Okay? I hope I'm clear enough.
So that was the surgery?
That was the surgery. So surgery which was done was a minimum surgery, just done enough to make sure that the patient lives. And if the patient lives and becomes a little better, with the better general condition, we can go in for a larger surgery. Incision that when we, to get into the abdomen, we have to make an incision. Okay? So the incision usually will be at least about this long to get into the abdomen. So how big a surgery is not dictated by the length of the incision. Okay, sometimes we may do a very small surgery. In this case, the surgery was not a very big surgery, but you have to give an incision big enough to go in. Laparoscopy is not an option in this case. Laparoscopy is the one where you use small incisions to get into the abdomen. Progression, as we call it. Once the general, see, when the patient came to us, also the general condition was not like a normal person. When we operate in a normal person, we can predict how he or she will behave. And usually if a normal healthy person is operated for some accident or something, these patients do well. But a patient who's having something like a major disease, like multi-drug resistance tuberculosis, the general condition of the patient is very bad. Okay, so in such patients, the outcome is very poor actually, so to say. And that is the reason why we didn't do the full surgery, but we did just enough to help patient live longer. Okay, so there are multiple factors. Like one of the things that we noticed was previously in the past, probably again because of tuberculosis, she had a condition which is called as constrictive pericarditis. For that, she had undergone one major operation in the heart. Okay, then she also, because the drugs she was taking, she had some effect on the sorry, not the kidney, it was on the liver. So because the liver function was not good, what was also happening is her albumin was very less. And because the albumin being very less, the problem what happens is they lose water into the body tissues. And that is what causes this kind of pulmonary edema. And that is what was the major problem in this patient. Dominant effect, let me put it this way. How one patient behaves with tuberculosis and another person behaves is very different. Okay, some people do very well with treatment. Some people, despite treatment, the earlier damage which was done because of the disease is so severe that it compromises to the patient to a large extent. And especially MDR tuberculosis, which is a severe form of tuberculosis, these patients, once they become okay with treatment also, their ability to breathe is compromised. Okay, that is usually the problem. It's not that once you have suffered from tuberculosis, after that you are absolutely okay. In some, yes, in some, no. We are going to have an internal, we call it as an audit, whenever we have this kind of death and all that, where there is, I won't say any media related issue, but we have our own internal quality check. So we'll be instituting an audit or a sort of audit inquiry into this to see if there are any areas where we may have gone wrong, where we can improve. This is a continuous process. That area. Now what happens is, when you get admitted to a hospital, when you get discharged, there's a discharge report that is given to you, which is quite an extensive but a concise report which tells everything about the patient, what was done and what not. When the patient dies, we don't generally give the whole written report like that. Okay, we usually give what is called as form number 4, which is a government requirement. So in case the patient has died, the cause of death is written in that, and what time patient died, age and other demographic details are usually there in that. After that, the actual death report comes. Okay, and at any time if the patient wants any extra information, all they need to do is write a letter to the medical superintendent and we'll provide the necessary information. It's that. Okay.
Most patients, when they are discharged, they are given a discharge summary. The discharge summary very clearly mentioned what time and on which date the patient was admitted, what was the problem for which the patient was admitted, and gives a brief of the treatment and the advice following discharge, what all medication the patient should take. And if we lose a patient, a death certificate is given. To my mind, a patient who's been admitted for a week, 10 days may have 30, 40, 50, anywhere from 10, 15 to 30, 40 sheets. Various investigations, daily temperature and blood pressure and respiration charting. So that entire patient data is not given to the patient. Those records are held in our medical records department. And if the patient requires, on a written request, those reports are made available to the patient. It is their right to have them. But our medical record has to maintain the patient record for a stipulated number of years by law. So medical records are available. If a patient or on patient authority, somebody requires them, they are made available to the patient. We don't have anything to hide.
You just need to.
Became a bit of a controversy because of lack of understanding by the patient. The patient did not see an oxygen cylinder. They thought oxygen will be given by a cylinder. We don't give oxygen by a cylinder. Every bed has an oxygen and vacuum port from which oxygen is given. We have a centralized oxygen, delivery system.